Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another Concord and Victory interview with our guest, Mike Ferrier. Mike has worked in international marketing and is also an author of several books. Mike, can you tell us a bit about your life?
Wow. My life started here, and it was a much different life to what you guys experience here. I've been walking around, and my God, where we had bare walls and machines giving you old-fashioned coffee, and you had the same menu day after day. You guys have got it good compared to the days when I was here. We had rationing. When I was here, we had rationing. But what's your question? How did I get into marketing?
Yeah, and then I was going to follow up.
The reason I got into marketing was entirely because of Stowe. I'll tell you what happened. My headmaster, or the housemaster at the time, said, you're a little bit North American. Why don't you handle the film club? I don't know what the non sequitur was there, but anyway. So I handled the film club, and my responsibility was to get the films in, get the gym organized, and make sure that certain houses had the best space and the next space, et cetera, et cetera. And it worked pretty well, and the houses came in. And then I thought, we're not filling it up, so I'm going to start putting some ads around. So I had this big flashing red light I put up, and underneath I had a description of what the film was about. And I noticed that the better I wrote the blurb about the film, the more people came. And I said, this is interesting. So if I write a good review of the film they're about to see, they come. So I said, this is the career for me. I want to persuade people to do things. It sounds fun, which brought me into advertising. And when my father asked me, and this is very good advice, he said to me, you want to go into advertising? All right, but here's the deal. I will get you a job, but you will spend 4 years learning the business before you go off and do something else, some other agency. So I spent 4 years in an agency earning £3.10 a week, learning everything about each department. And it's so important because I think you're going to talk about this later. So many people go into marketing and into business and they don't know shit about the business they're going into. And if you listen to people like Bill Gates, you listen to people like the Beatles, they will put their success down to the fact that they spend 10,000 hours studying their craft before they let out and did it. So I tell my own son, who's an entrepreneur, learn the business before you go out and into the world. And that I did, thanks to my father. And I joined an agency. I did everything in the agency, and then I joined Shell as their international marketing department. And then they fired me because Shell said, why would we have 150 people in an advertising department and employ 5 advertising agencies? It makes no sense. So they fired me, and they gave me a £500 severance. And I thought, great, now I can buy a house, because I was just recently married. And then Shell said, oh, we're firing 100 people, but we're keeping you. So all of a sudden, I had no money to buy the house, and I was in a panic, and my uncle had to loan me the money. But from there, I was... because I worked for Shell, and because I had this experience of whatever Shell was doing around the world fascinated me. And then ESSO came knocking on the door and said, we want you to run the ESSO account for Europe, which I did. And then another excellent thing happened to me was my company went bankrupt, and I was too stupid to know. I was too hard working. I was running the Zurich office at the time, that I ended up being there, and almost all my colleagues had gone to other agencies. I ended up at the age of 30 running Europe. And the surprising thing about life is, you think you can't do it, but the more you get pushed up the line, the easier it becomes, because there are other people who do your work for you. So I quickly became what is known as a regional director. I ran Europe, I ran Latin America, I ran the Far East, and I ran Canada, as well as Mexico. So that's how I got to leaving the business about, how many years, Diana? 40 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago? By the way, stand up. You want to see my wife?
I
It's my wife, Diana. We met in Caracas, which is another advantage of going abroad. You meet beautiful women, by the way. What was I saying? Something unimportant?
Yeah, talking about how you were the regional
Oh yeah, I was the
director.
only one left. So I became the regional director, and it was a lot of fun. And I think somebody put in this internet talk about me. I was one of 12 people who built up the world's largest advertising agency. If you want later, we'll tell you why we did it, how we did it. So that's a bit of my background.
Well, thank you, Mike. Imogen?
So the first question is, how do iconic campaigns like Tiger in Your Tank or Because You're Worth It, which were among the first to achieve global recognition, compare to modern digital-first global campaigns?
Interesting. Did you guys know the Tiger in the Tank campaign? I think we can put it on the slide, right? This was a fascinating campaign. Is it on there? Yeah. And this I got for Gordon.
Thank you. That's large. Maybe XL.
No, it's large. It's XL. Here you go. All right. Story of ESSO is a very interesting one. ESSO was an oil company, and they were locked in a battle with Shell to tell the world who had the best gasoline. And they spent $50 million researching a new gasoline, which gave a little extra performance, cleans your engine a little better, is a little more economical. And they asked us, we were their agency worldwide, they asked us to produce campaigns telling the world how great this new product was. And we produced about 15 campaigns, and they bombed. All of them bombed. And we were having, do you have the picture of the tiger from England? Yeah. We were given 24 hours by ESSO to come up with a campaign or lose the account, which was 30% of our worldwide billings, ESSO. And there's a guy sitting at this table over lunch in Washington who remembered this campaign from England. And he said, I wonder if we could doodle something and maybe the tiger will represent power. And so we presented it to ESSO. ESSO said, I've never seen such nonsense in all my life. We spent $50 million producing this new gasoline, and you want some corny tiger to present it? This is ridiculous. But anyway, they agreed to test the campaign. I think you got another version of it there, right? Testing the campaign, and it turned out to be an enormous success, a huge success. And we'll get to that a little later. And they couldn't understand why. They spent $30 million developing a new gasoline, and nobody talked about the new gasoline in the research we did after this. But everybody bought the product. They went to the station, and 1 million of these tiger tails were sold. 1 million tiger tails were sold. Would you go to the, no. Then we had various countries in Europe say, this is ridiculous. The French said, oh, les Anglais sont stupides, this is ridiculous. How could you possibly have such a campaign like this? We're intellectual French people. You know what the French are like. And the Germans said, das ist nicht möglich. Was ist das jetzt? Das ist nicht serious. This isn't serious. It's not serious marketing. And the Italians, Agip Gas Company said, we're a serious gas company or a petrol company. We make serious products. This is an insult to our industry. Well, anyway, the campaign went on to various different countries. It was a success everywhere. In fact, the French, who were so dismissive, it became the campaign of the month, campaign of the year, and their sales went up 30%, the highest increase of any gasoline sale everywhere. Now ask yourself, why, before we got to this guy, why do you think, I could take you back to the 50s, right? This is the 50s. Why do you think this campaign scored so well? Anybody have any idea? Go back to the 50s, right? When all advertising was factual. Dove soap, 97 ways it cleans you better. That Shell was 9 ingredients for top performance. Suddenly in comes this. Why do you think it worked? I have badges for good answers. Come on, give me an answer, somebody. What? Yes, sir.
Did it mean to appeal to children?
Sorry?
Did the large animals appeal to children?
It did, but it also appealed to adults. I didn't see the top. Sorry, go ahead, sir.
Is it because of the tiger?
The what?
The tiger.
Yeah, but why the tiger?
Because like they're cool and like fast. So like your car's fast.
Well, you're getting near. You win an award.
I get a badge.
Give him an award. You were the. This was a Dutchman. I have changed his name because he may be still alive. But he was a square-headed Dutchman who said, this isn't possible. We spend all this money on this campaign and nobody repeats the benefits of the gasoline. What the hell's going on? He talks to the University of Leiden, and $50,000 later, this is the 50s, remember, that's a lot of money. 2,000 interviews later, what do you think the Leiden University said? Their conclusion. I think we have it in the next slide. They are rewarding you just because they like the advertising. Not because of the gasoline, not because of the 50 million you spent on developing it. They just liked the tiger. They liked the experience. And what did that watershed moment produce? The first time entertainment started the advertising business. People realized that to entertain could be as possible, as important as actually telling the benefits of a product. What's the next slide? I forgot. You have another question? Oh, that's another campaign. You got another question?
So Mike, in terms of cultural approaches, you worked in 15 different countries, you speak 5 languages. Did you have to go about your work differently in different countries?
That's very interesting. People always focus on the differences between people. But what they forget is 90% of people are the same. I guess you get up, you brush your teeth, you do your ablutions, you worry about your wife, your kids are driving you nuts, you can't pay your mortgage. 90% is the same. And then you get the other cultural feature is there's more similarity to a fisherman in Brest and a fisherman in Cornwall than a fisherman in Cornwall and a lawyer in Paris. So you get cultural differences, but also cultural equals between different stratas of society. And then you find with modern, which you guys know better than me, modern media, things spread so fast that you almost has to be careful for just little differences. But they're little differences. For example, if you have a L'Oreal ad and you have a beautiful white model in America, you might want to have a dark model in Malaysia or a Chinese model in China. But the message is the same. And if your message is that, that's how we made the whole success of McCann Erickson, and we became the first agency in the world, was to realize that you could have one campaign and spread it over many different countries. I'll give you an example. Do you know Black & Decker? The drill company? Girls, you don't know it. The boys, you know, right? Black & Decker drills. What do I got here? A bunch of bunnies?
It's like DeWalt, but not quite as good.
Well, it's Black & Decker the drills. It's our company. And to get the account worldwide, we said to them, do you realize that this drill you're marketing in 25 countries is the exact same drill? It's doing the exact same thing. It's making holes. It's making them a little faster, a little better. And you've produced a commercial saying the exact same thing in 5 different countries of Europe, and you've wasted $1.1 million doing it. Now this is insane. Produce the same commercial, allow it to have little differences in different markets. Maybe Black & Decker in the south of Portugal is used for ceramics. Maybe it's used for drilling wood in England, but the differences are small. We can use one campaign, spend $250,000 on a very good campaign on a drill, and you give it to everybody else. And they can change it, but there, you've saved a lot of money that you can put into media. And that led us to Coca-Cola, where Coca-Cola, you know, all over the world is exactly the same. The product's the same, the drinkers are the same, kids, mainly kids. The usage is the same, the price is the same. So why wouldn't the advertising be the same? And Coca-Cola had a policy of one sight, one sound, one sell. Same voice, same approach, same sales message. And it worked everybody, except for the debacle we're going to talk about now, right?
Yeah.
Anybody want to go next? Beat me up.
We're going back across, yeah.
Okay, so what transferable skills should young marketers prioritize in today's digital and data-driven landscape to stand out, both UK and global markets?
Transferable skills?
Yeah.
Do you realize that you have one huge advantage? You here in this country? Do you know what it is? Talking about going abroad, right? You're talking about going abroad?
Yeah.
You know what it is? Who said that?
Your lovely wife.
You cheated. It's language. You all speak English. English is the international language of commerce. You have a huge advantage. Wherever you go, you're immediately able to communicate with the people that matter in the countries concerned. You can't have one. Who came the closest? Anybody else mentioned language? Who did? She did? All right, come here and get your prize. And Brits have another advantage, is the British Isles has a history of international commerce, the Royal Navy running the world. We know how to colonize. We colonize fairly. We're good colonizers. We're genuinely liked around the world. And wherever you go, you find out that you're basically appreciated. In fact, there's an interesting fact. There are more Brits running international companies than there are Brits running UK companies. Almost all major UK companies are run by Europeans, which to me is a total scandal. I was in a Piccadilly train last night. Piccadilly train used to be made by Mayor, I forget the company, a British company. Why is the Piccadilly line buying trains from Austria? To me, as an ex-Brit, this is insane. This is insane. Why can't we produce tube trains? We invented the goddamn things many years ago. How come we have to go to Austria to buy tube trains? It's ridiculous. But you'll find that the head of Emirates Airlines, the most successful airline in the world, what is he? He's a Brit. A lot of these companies are Brit. And as for going abroad, do you have that clip of Doug Casey? Can you have the put? Can you can you turn the clip on Doug Casey? What he's saying about Africa? Go back. It's about the third slide. Stop. Yeah. Whoop. Doug Casey is a very famous U.S. Investor. Well, he lives in Uruguay, but this is what he wrote only a month ago. If I were 25 years old today, I would go to Africa. A prepared young Westerner will find it easy to move with the top levels of society. He is unusual, will have more money, more sophistication, and contacts than any of the locals. It is not easy to vault yourself to the top in the UK or the US because there are millions of people like you competing for the best jobs. And the experience you learn abroad, languages for example, will make you unique when you come back home. Very good advice in my opinion. There are problems, we can go over them, pros and cons if you want, of going abroad. But this is important. If you're running an international company like I did, and you have Germany, France, England, America at the head table, you also have Liechtenstein, Monaco, Kenya at the same table. So the exposure you will never get working way down in a huge company in England or America, you'll get at the top of a small company from a small country. So you get the exposure. I got the exposure. People knew who I was long before they knew the guy on the 6th floor is doing a much more important job in New York. So I think it's fun. And anyway, I see many of you are from abroad, right? I see many. How many of you are from abroad now? Yeah. Isn't it fun to go to other countries? It's a lot of fun. Why would you spend your entire life in Tunbridge Wells? It's just fun. But there are buts, and the buts are, it can be difficult tax-wise. If you're married, your wife has a career, and you have a career, and what the hell, whose career is going to come first? You have pension problems. I have pensions from 5 different countries, and it drives me crazy, because each of those 5 countries demand me to prove I'm alive once a year. I'm at the French embassy in Cayman Islands about every 2 months, begging him to stamp me saying I'm still alive. There are pension problems, there are insurance problems, family problems. There are problems, but if you can maneuver them, I would never have got to where I got in my company had I stayed in the United Kingdom. That's for sure. So I was lucky, but I speak languages, so it helps. But go for it. Why wouldn't you? Do you want to spend your entire life in East London? I see blank faces. Would you? How many of you are planning to go abroad? Good for you. Where are you going to go? Any ideas? Any idea where you're going to go? You, sir, with the spectacles? Oh, back home. But why don't you go to Kenya? Why wouldn't you go to Kenya? Yeah. Yeah, because they need people there. But in Africa, you got to be a little careful because the murder rate is very different. I think it's 7.9 per thousand in Johannesburg, and in Nairobi it's 2 point something. So you got to be a little careful where you go. But me, I would always go abroad. And my wife, she loves going abroad. In fact, I met her in Caracas. Caracas was one of my offices when I was running Latin America. And I saw her, and I just got divorced. And I said to her, I saw her from the back, and I said, don't go near that woman. That's dangerous. We got there, and I said to her, uncharacteristic, because I'm not that sort of a person, really. I said to her, do you want to go out tonight? And she said, what? And she was engaged to 3 people at that time. Can you imagine a blonde in Caracas where everybody's black haired? So we went out, and the rest is history. That was 44 years ago. The rest is history. Okay, hit me again. What you got?
So, in some of your campaigns, did you ever find like a balance between creativity and strategy, and how would you find that kind of balance?
Yes, that's a very good question. The way you approach an advertising campaign nowadays is often from the creative end first. Have you seen the latest Jaguar ad? Look at it. It's insane. It's all sorts of, you remember the Paris Olympics? All sorts of strangely dressed people. They're there, and there's just a sign which says Jaguar. This business of marketing is a difficult business, and it relies on 4 different pegs. In fact, I'll give you first a definition of what advertising is. Anybody want to suggest a definition of what advertising is? I'll give it to you. And remember it, it's important. Gives you a solid reason to buy a product at any time. In that Jaguar ad, which I'm sure you'll see, it doesn't give me any reason to buy this product. It's just imagery. Sales promotion, on the other hand, which you've heard about, probably don't know what it is. Sales promotion gives you an additional reason to buy the product now, like 2 for 1 or a competition or whatever. It's an additional reason. It works better when the overall reason, the promise of why this brand should be bought. Now, to get to the promise, you have to study the consumer and what he, usually she, wants, and then marry that to what the product has to offer, and marry those things together. And that's hard work. And a lot of people don't bother to do the work. You find that the most successful marketers spend the time on the work. And then once you decide, okay, Pepsodent toothpaste, the reason they enter the U.S., the benefit, if you like, the promise is makes your teeth white, stops halitosis, your boyfriend's going to love you. That's the premise, okay? And then you make sure that that basic premise appears in every single thing the advertiser does. Right now, with all this fractionation between bloggers and things on internet, etc., it's difficult to maintain that basic promise through all the different media now available, and there's hundreds of them. And then having decided that, and that's your basic premise, Pepsodent makes your teeth brighter and your breath smell less. You make sure that appears everywhere in every commercial. And then you decide, where am I going to find these people who are worried about halitosis? So you do your research, and you find the people who are likely to be worried about breath smell, and then you do a very simple thing. You write 20 headlines, and you go and talk to the people and say, which of this headline about Pepsodent toothpaste most interests you? Very simple. We make it completely simple. You'll find out that the one that says, guaranteed lower breath smell with Pepsodent, for example, is what interests me most. Bang, you got your campaign. You got your campaign. And you can't start from the other end saying, I have a wonderful idea for a commercial. I'm going to get some famous author to say, I always do Pepsodent. What does that tell me? It tells me nothing. It just tells me that he happens to use it. Now, a few people might be interested in that, but most people won't be. So to answer your question, yeah, the strategy is important, but to get to the strategy, you do a lot of hard work. And some of the major campaigns of history, like there's a famous Schlitz beer commercial years ago, which the guy who went around the factory looking at what is different about Schlitz beer found that they steam cleaned the bottles. And his campaign was, Schlitz beer is the only beer which has steam cleaned bottles. Who cares about steam cleaned bottles? But it was a definite benefit, which made the brand take off. So yeah, it's a strategy, it's hard work. It's knowing the client, knowing the product, knowing the consumer, testing how he comes out, and then finding the media to reach him. That's the fifth point. Now, how do I reach the people who want to listen to an argument that makes their breath smell better? Where are these people? Well, maybe they're young people who do a lot of partying. If that's the truth, then I know what media to use. I use bloggers maybe, youthful bloggers. I use teen magazines or whatever. Now I don't know what I'm doing. But if you don't do that basic work, and more marketers are not doing that basic work, you're not going to have success. My opinion. Yeah. Sir?
So you speak passionately about hard work. Is that your best bit of advice you'd give to someone looking to get into advertising today?
My boss, who was a very successful man, although a pain in the ass, his reason for success, and he ran a whole bunch of our advertising companies, his motto for success was, I get up at 8 and I go home at 8. I get up earlier and I go home later. And I work a little harder. But you have to warn about burnout. I'll give you an example. My boss said to me when I was working in London, we've got a problem in Zurich. We have to open an office in Zurich. And I said, I've never opened an office in my life. So he said, well, you speak German. So I said, no, I speak Dutch. Good enough, go. So I said, but I don't know how to do it. I don't know what, I've never done this. And he said, look, if I think you can do it, you can do it. Now go and damn well do it. And you did it. What was your question? I forgot. I'm terrible.
Just whether hard work is the best bit of advice you give.
Hard work, but you've got to be careful of burnout. I worked so hard in Zurich that my wife at the time was saying, you look terrible. I'm going to send you to the doctor. And here's a wonderful piece of advice for you. The doctor was a Hungarian refugee. And he took one look at me, and I was gray-faced. And he said, what do you do? And I said, well, I'm opening an advertising company, and it's a terrible problem. Got to get new business. If I don't get new business, it's not going to grow. Blah, 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 blah. And he said, you wait until I've seen all the other patients, and I'm going to talk to you. And he said, tell me your work week. I said, oh, I just work all the week through. And he said, well, you're an idiot. You're going to die in 5 years. You're going to already have heart rhythms. And he said, and I said to him, but hard work never killed anybody. And he said, are you kidding me? Hard work, stress is the biggest killer of all in the business community. This is what you're going to do for me, and I never forgot it, and I suggest you never forget it. He said, from 12 o'clock on Saturday to 6 a.m. on Monday, you belong to me, the doctor. You're not going to think about business. You're going to have a hobby. And he said, the best hobby is having a mistress, but I don't expect that'll be a great popular thing with your wife. You have a hobby and you think of that hobby, because the brain has to have time to settle down and refile everything it learned during the week. And I never forget it. I had basically a nervous breakdown. And I never had the problem again. I always put the weekend aside unless there's the world was coming to an end. And then, of course, you spend the time. But you get immersed in business, and you get more and more stress, more and more pressure put on you. You've got to find that time to do something else, to let your brain cool off. Otherwise, you go to Japan, you see all these poor Japanese who are burnt out, finished because they cannot stop working. They work themselves to death. Really it is. So it's a good piece of advice, which I've always remembered. And Ian back there, one of my colleagues, he remembered it. Right, Ian?
Yeah, you'd come into the office in the evening about 8:30 with a bottle of scotch and say, tell me your troubles, and you try to, and you say, oh, shut up, have a scotch.
Ian lives in Buckingham and used to be my manager for the Middle East.
Yeah.
So that's why he's got all that gray hair. The Middle East was impossible to run, by the way. It was very, very difficult, because the Middle Easterners are essentially tribes who protect their water wells. And they can be your friend one day and your enemy the next day. And it's very difficult to navigate that area. But we did it thanks to Ian. He handled them all over there. He's a good old friend of mine. Anyway, next. What's next?
So my next question is, how do you deal with creative direction from your customers when you think it will not be effective to go in that direction?
So your client is saying ABC, and you think it's wrong.
Yeah, you don't think it will.
The method I use, I call the éventail. It's a French word meaning fan. So when a client says to you, I have an idea, you can't say no, because guess what? It's his money, right? His product, his money. So you've got to take it into account. But what I used to do is I tell my creative team, look at their campaign, do the pros and cons, and let's present 10 other campaigns and go through them. And maybe he's right. It's possible he's right. I mean, sometimes clients are right. And you go through each of the campaigns and you say, in my opinion, this campaign is probably the most likely to success. Or we've looked at all different conversions, and I think you're right. you can sometimes say you're right. But if you're wrong, then you have to prove them wrong gently, but don't disrespect your client. You know, respect him. He has a point of view. Argue it, talk it through, and then if you don't agree with it, then slowly convince him by other campaigns which are probably going to research better and research work better. But as I told somebody coming down here today, the thing that clients hate most is people they can't work with. They hate argumentative people, people they don't like. And as I told somebody coming in here, if you present as a team, the team must have one leader, the team must be all happy and like each other, and all are on the same base. And one person produces all the slides, is the catalyst to get all the people's opinions together. And the reason being that imagine if you're a client, okay, and you have your advertising agency in front of you, and they're argumentative, they can't get on together. Which of you wants to work with a pain in the ass colleague? Do you want to? No. You want to have a reasoned discussion. But if somebody's saying to you, oh, Mr. Client, you're such an amateur, you know what the hell you're doing. Leave it to me. You want to work with that guy? No. So it's important to get your clients to like you. Or if you can't like you because you have different points of view, to respect you and know that you respect them. And I'll give you another hint. If you're a client and you're dissatisfied with your agency, and you go to various different agencies and ask them, would you be interested in our account? What are they normally going to do? They're going to tell you all the good things they've done for other clients. That's not how you get new business. The thing to do is, your first thing you do is not talk about how good you did with other clients, is to find out what's bothering him. Why did he fire his existing agency? Now, how do you do that? You hire or you interview his staff, the other agency's staff, and you find out what the problem is. And once you find out what the problem is, you know how to answer it. And what the client wants to know is, you've listened to what my problem is, you've understood it, and here's what our solution is your problem. Another thing which irritates clients to death is, they come to you and you say, there are 5 things I want you to reply to, questions I have, or 10 questions. Cathay Pacific, which was the last major account I won, had 9 questions they wanted answered. Every agency ignored the answers. We answered every single question in the greatest detail. And we were not expected to win. We were expected, in fact, to be thrown out because they liked another agency. But we won because the client said, aha, this fellow understands what we want. And that's the key. Not how good you are, it's what's bothering you. Why are you coming to me? Why are you upset with these other people? Listen to what the client has to say, and don't be so arrogant as to say, my company is wonderful. You came here, let me tell you what I did for Ajax, what I did for Floor Cleaner, how clever I am with this campaign, with that campaign. They couldn't care less. What are you going to do for me? And these are my problems. But it's big business. I mean, you go for a piece of new business, and it's a gamble. You probably spend $500,000 to $1 million trying to get a new piece of business. And you go usually from 6 agencies to 4 agencies to 2 agencies to 1. And each step of the way, you either got to gamble another $100,000, $200,000, or give it up, or say, no, I'm going to go to that next step, another $200,000, $300,000 to get everything together, to another step, last step, maybe another $500,000. So you're maybe $750,000 in the hole to prepare this presentation. And you go to bed shaking, thinking, my God, if I get it, fine, but if I lose the company $750,000, just what do you think my bonus is going to be this Christmas? It's going to be a pretty low bonus, pretty low bonus. What do you got?
This is the last question.
So for a last question, out of all the places you've lived and worked in, where's your favourite country been to work and live in, and why?
Well, my wife is going to say,
17.
where?
But the favorite place? Hong Kong.
She loved Hong Kong. She loved Hong Kong. I loved everywhere, frankly. I got a kick out of everywhere, except for two places. You're going to force me to tell you where they are?
Yeah.
Puerto Rico. I couldn't stand the place. The Puerto Ricans were an American, basically American colony. And you know, are there any Americans here?
More importantly, is there any Puerto Ricans there?
Americans are bad colonizers because they themselves have a history of battling colonies to get to be independent. They are actually overly protective of their own colonies. And so a country like Puerto Rico is almost totally, I think it's 92% work on food stamps, something like that. And Diana tells a story where she went into a restaurant and wanted a fresh fish, and the fish came and it didn't taste fresh at all. And the restaurateur said, "Of course my fish is fresh." And what happened, Diana?
He looked me in the back and he said, "How dare you say our fish isn't fresh?" I said, "This fish is older than me." He takes me in the back to the freezer and goes, "Look, we just imported this from Miami yesterday." So it was frozen fish. Forgot.
A country surrounded by water can't even produce a fish because it's been nannied. You'll find the same in many American colonies. But it's nice. But Colombia was the other country I found difficult to handle because the time we went there, it was lawless. Now it's okay. It was lawless. The only time in my life I had to walk around with a guy with a gun behind me, a machine gun, and I had to be in a nondescript car so that I wasn't hijack material. And it was kind of scary, and the weather is terrible in Bogota. And they had the Medellin drug cartels, and I had a client in Medellin, Yardley Cosmetics. I had to go there, I was scared to death to go there. But there you are. And then Salvador, in the days of the revolution in Salvador, that was very difficult. And I decided, you know, I was running Latin America and Mexico, and I said to myself, these poor bastards who are in the agency, there's only about 20 or 25 of them. They're facing these terrible problems. The reception girl had a machine gun in front of her. Can you imagine this? A 20-year-old girl with a machine gun in case the bandits came in? And I said to my wife, we got to go there. They got to know who they're working for. These poor people. So we went, but we were met at the airport, and there was a limousine waiting. They put somebody in the limousine, and they put me in jeans. I hate jeans. I've never worn jeans in my life. Put me in jeans on the back of a motorcycle, and I went on the motorcycle to a different hotel than I had been booked in, so that they couldn't find me. But the staff has a duty. Their staff has a duty to know who they're working for, and if they're working their butts off, they got to know who they're working for and why. In fact, I have a policy, which is not very popular, but my policy is you're working for your shareholder, you're working for your clients, and you're working for your staff. And my motto was, you can take somebody working for you, the average worker will work 72% productivity. If you can raise that by teaching, by being kind, by being appreciative, If you can raise that to 92%, stop people watching porn on TV and all that stuff. If you can raise that to 92%, what have you done? You raised your productivity 20%. You don't have to fire people. And people forget that. You now see people in Wall Street saying, I'm so clever, we're going to get rid of 20,000 people. What a disaster that is. How many families are you ruining by getting rid of 20,000 people? And you really haven't tried hard to see if you can raise their productivity? That's not right. That's not right. And the other thing my boss taught me, and this is also perhaps very useful to you, is when you're doing your budget, he used to say, in the old days we did a budget, we did our expenses, we did our revenue, and what was left would be profit. And he says, no. What you do is you take your profit first. 15% of your revenue is profit. That belongs to the shareholder. It's a tax. Now what you got left is what you can use to create the infrastructure, the staff you need. And that's great. That's a discipline which is deep in my mind and worked all the time. This is one of the reasons why we never had, in all the years I worked for McCann, I never had an office in deficit, because that was the rule. The tax is 15%. If you make 20%, you get a big bonus. Anyway, but in my company now there are no bonuses. It's finished. When I left McCann Erickson in when was it, sweetheart? 1995. I was rung up by my boss and said, your region is doing so well, I give you $1.27 million bonus. I nearly fell out of the car. I couldn't believe it. Now, that company had no bonuses whatsoever, because the business has been eroded away by all the things we talked about. You know that CNN used to have 12 to 13 million people watching it? You know what it is? You know CNN, right? You all know CNN? Cable news network from America, one of the 13 networks in America. You know what it is now? 800,000 viewers. New York Times, down 60%. New York Times won't exist in 5 years, because all the new media are eating them to death. They're dying. And now I got to be really careful because of the young people here. There's a sudden and huge reversal of woke in America since Trump won. Everybody's anti-woke. And 13 of the 14 US networks, they are woke, left-wing, extreme left-wing. And the American people, the left wing doesn't understand that they represent a tiny proportion of the American population, maybe 4%. Blacks, 13%. The other 96% are sensible, normal, hard-working Americans who want nothing to do with girls playing in men playing in girls' soccer, any of this extreme left-wing nonsense. It's suddenly a wave against it. And I know you probably have a more tendency, because of your age, to be on the side of wokeism, and that's good at your age. As Winston Churchill used to say, do you remember? If you're not a socialist at 18, you have no heart. And if you're still a socialist at 25, you have no head. I think that's my attitude. You're not smiling because you don't agree. That's okay. That doesn't matter. Anybody else got a question?
Maybe if you've got any questions from these guys are waiting for supper. That's what it is. I can tell.
Yeah, I'm not getting beaten up enough here.
Tom, do you have a question about a book? No?
Sorry?
Oh yeah. What kind of inspired you to write some of your books that you bought today?
Oh, I'll tell you that. That's interesting, because that's my wife's fault. And my wife said to me, so many funny things happened as we ran our regions, Latin America, for example. Why don't you make some notes of what happened? So when I retired in 1995, I think it was, I took all those notes and made it into a book. It was called Propellers and Purple Socks. And it was all about the funny things that happened to us as we delivered on our way. I'll give you one example. When I was in London running an agency there, Smith & Nephew, you know Smith & Nephew, the company? They were launching a new barrier cream, you know, against your skin. And
We've got a few gifts for you, and we just wanted to see if you recognised any of them. So.
So thank you everyone. You're going to pop off to supper, or you're not going to get